I watched humans march into battle and understood why the galaxy quakes. Part 1. Kael'Vir sat alone in the dim observation chamber high above the planet Karis V. His long fingers rested on the smooth control panel as he stared through the wide viewport. The world below looked small and quiet from this distance, but he knew better. The surface burned with war and always had for many centuries. He belonged to the observant Concord, a very old species that chose watching over fighting. Their bodies were thin and tall, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes made for seeing far and remembering everything. They lived so long that most other races seemed like short, bright sparks. Kael'Vir himself had watched empires rise and fall for over 900 standard years. He recorded battles, studied tactics, and wrote careful notes about how every species met death or victory. The Concord built hidden stations like this one in high orbits around contested worlds. They never joined wars. They never helped or harmed. They only observed and stored the knowledge for future use. Kael'Vir liked the quiet work. Most days nothing new happened. Most days followed the same pattern of violence and silence. Today felt different. He checked the main display again. The mining planet Karis VI had rich veins of rare metals that everyone wanted. The scaled lords held most of the surface with their heavy armies and huge machines. The swarm remnant controlled the deep tunnels with endless waves of biting creatures. Both sides had fought here for decades, and neither could win completely. Now a third force had arrived. The humans came in old transports painted in dull gray and patched with mismatched plates. Kael'Vir counted 18,000 soldiers in total, a tiny number compared to the millions below. They landed in fast dropships that screamed through the thick clouds and touched down in a narrow valley between two mining ridges. The ships opened, and the humans poured out. They carried rifles, pistols, grenades, and heavy packs. No bright banners, no loud music, no speeches over open channels. Kael'Vir zoomed the view closer. He saw humans in mixed armor. Some pieces came from scaled lord designs. Others looked like they were cut from swarm carapaces. The weapons showed the same mix, human rifles next to captured plasma lances and bio-launchers. They moved quickly and without wasted steps. They dug trenches, piled rocks, set up auto turrets, and laid sharp wire in patterns that looked planned long before landing. He opened a new file on his panel and spoke softly into the recorder. Observation log. Karis VI Cycle 412. New arrivals designated humans. Terran Coalition Expeditionary Force. Numbers estimated at 18,000. Equipment condition poor to moderate but functional. Behavior calm and focused. No visible panic. No demands broadcast. No attempt to contact other forces. They build defenses as if the battle has already started. Paused and watched again. A scaled lord patrol appeared on the ridge above the valley. 5 heavy grav tanks floated forward with guns pointed down. The lead tank fired once. A bright plasma bolt struck the ground near the human landing zone. Dirt exploded upward and rocks rained down. The humans did not run. Instead, small teams moved out from cover. 2 soldiers crawled forward with long tubes on their shoulders. They waited until the tanks came closer. Then they fired. Rockets streaked up and hit the lead tank in the belly. Fire bloomed, and the tank dropped hard, smoke pouring from its vents. The other tanks turned to shoot, but the humans had already vanished back into the rocks. Kael'Vir felt a small surprise move through him. Most species would cheer after such a hit, or shout in fear. The humans stayed quiet. They simply reloaded and waited for the next move. He added to the log. First contact with scaled lord forces. Humans destroyed 1 grav tank with portable anti-armor weapons. No celebration observed. No verbal communication detected among the group. Tactical efficiency high. Casualties 0 on human side so far. Night came fast on Caris V. The planet had short days and long dark periods. Kael'ver switched to infrared and night vision filters. The human camp glowed with small heat sources. They cooked food, repaired gear, and posted sentries in pairs. Every position had overlapping fields of fire. Kael'ver noticed how they placed their wounded in central shelters guarded by armed medics. Even the injured held weapons if they could lift them. He compared the sight to old records. He had seen brave species before. The tall crystal folk of Vara once stood against a Dominion fleet and died without retreat. He had seen clever species too. The quick-winged traders of Lear hid and struck from shadows until the enemy grew tired. But the humans showed something else. They acted like the war belonged to them already, like the ground under their boots had always been theirs. A sworn scout wave emerged from a nearby tunnel. Thousands of small clawing things rushed across the open ground toward the human lines. Kael'ver expected the usual response. Most defenders would fire wildly, then pull back when the numbers grew too great. The humans waited. They let the first wave come close. Then hidden emplacements opened up. Machine guns chattered in steady bursts. Flamethrowers reached out and turned swarms into ash. Grenades rolled down the slope and burst in bright flashes. The front line of swarm creatures fell in heaps. The rest kept coming because that was their way. The humans adjusted. They pulled back one trench line and let the swarm pour into the empty space. Then charges hidden in the dirt exploded and collapsed the ground under the attackers. Bodies vanished into new craters. Smoke rose thick and black. Kael'ver leaned closer to the screen. He had never seen a defense quite like this. Purpose. They turned retreat into a weapon. They made the enemy pay for every meter, and then paid nothing in return. The swarm wave broke and flowed back into the tunnels, leaving only silence and burning remains. He spoke again into the recorder. Swarm assault repelled in under 30 minutes. Humans used controlled withdrawal and pre-placed explosives. Losses on attacker side estimated at 70%. Human losses minimal, perhaps 5 or 6 soldiers down. Medical teams already moving to recover them. No signs of morale collapse. No signs of fear. Kael'ver sat back and rubbed his large eyes. He felt the first faint touch of something unfamiliar. Not fear exactly, but a kind of careful interest. He had watched countless battles, and always understood the reasons behind them. Pride, revenge, survival, territory. But this felt different. The humans fought as if losing was not an option, not because of orders, but because they refused to accept it as possible. Dawn. Less than 4 hours. The scaled lords would come again soon, with stronger forces. The swarm would try new tunnels. The humans would face both at once. Kael'ver decided to keep the station sensors on full power. He would not miss a single moment. He opened another file and labeled it simply, Humans. Priority observation continues. He looked down at the small glowing camp on the dark planet. They had marched into battle without songs or promises. They had come to stay. And for reasons he could not yet name, Kael'ver found himself hoping they would. The stars turned slowly above Caris VI. The war waited for morning, and somewhere in the quiet of his watchpost, an old observer began to wonder if the galaxy still knew how to measure strength. I watched humans march into battle, and understood why the galaxy quakes. The first true dawn broke over Caris VI, with fire already in the sky. Scaled Lord Grav tanks rolled forward in wide lines, their heavy hulls crushing rock and bone alike. Plasma lances glowed blue-white as they stabbed down into the human positions. Smoke rose in thick columns where the shots hit true. Kael'ver counted at least 80 tanks in the first wave, supported by thousands of infantry marching behind, energy shields raised high. From his high-orbit post, he watched without blinking. The humans had spent the night strengthening their lines. They dug deeper trenches, connected them with narrow tunnels, and placed more mines in careful patterns. Their numbers stayed small, but their positions looked stronger than before. The attack began exactly as Calvier expected. The lead tanks fired together. A wall of plasma rolled across the valley. The ground shook, and bright flashes lit the morning like small suns. Most species would have broken under such power. They would run or hide, or die screaming in the open. The humans stayed in place. Small teams waited in hidden bunkers until the tanks came within range. Then they launched salvage Dominion missiles from shoulder tubes. The missiles flew low and fast, hugging the ground to avoid anti-air fire. Several struck home. One tank lost its main gun in a shower of sparks. Another tilted sideways as its grav drive failed and crashed into the dirt. The crew tried to climb out, but human snipers picked them off one by one with precise shots. Calvier spoke softly into his recorder. Second major engagement. Scaled Lord armored assault. 80+ grav tanks. Humans respond with captured anti-vehicle weapons. Accuracy very high. Tank losses already at 9. No human retreat observed. Positions holding. The infantry advanced next. Scaled Lords were tall and strong, with thick scales and heavy blades. They roared challenges as they charged. Forward, shields overlapped to form a moving wall. The humans met them with steady fire. Rifles barked in disciplined bursts. Grenades sailed over the trenches and burst among the attackers. Limbs flew and scales cracked under the impacts. When the first line reached the outer trenches, the humans did something strange. They pulled back 10 meters, leaving the trench empty. The Scaled Lords poured in, thinking they had broken through. Then charges hidden under the dirt floor exploded. The trench collapsed inward, burying hundreds in rock and fire. The survivors tried to climb out, but flamethrowers reached up from lower positions and turned them into torches. Calvier felt his long fingers tighten on the controls. He had seen traps before, but never so perfectly timed. The humans gave ground only to make the enemy pay more for taking it. He added to the log. Controlled withdrawal used again. Enemy pushed into kill zone and destroyed with explosives and flame. Losses on Scaled Lord side. Heavy, perhaps 400 in first push. Human casualties low. Medics already dragging wounded to cover. Then the swarm joined the fight. Tunnels opened in 3 places at once. Endless waves of clawing creatures surged out. Some flew on buzzing wings. Others burrowed under the ground. The air filled with their sharp clicking sounds. They aimed straight for the human center, where the fighting looked heaviest. The humans shifted formation without a word. Squads moved to new positions, leaving gaps that looked like weakness. The swarm rushed to fill those gaps. Then auto-turrets hidden in the rocks opened fire. Streams of bullets cut through the swarms like blades. Neurotoxin sprayers taken from dead swarm bodies hissed clouds of green mist. The mist settled on the creatures, and they began to twitch and fall. When the main wave reached the trenches, humans threw back packs filled with swarm biomass. They ignited the packs with thermite. The biomass burned hot and fast, sending choking, black smoke across the battlefield. The swarm creatures slowed, blinded and coughing. Many turned on each other in confusion. Calvier watched the chaos spread. The Scaled Lords tried to push through the smoke, but stumbled over dead swarm bodies. Their shields flickered under the heat. The humans took advantage. They advanced in short rushes, throwing grenades and firing from the hip. They closed the distance and fought hand to hand. Power armor fists crushed Scaled Lord skulls. Blades taken from fallen enemies sliced through thick hides. He recorded every detail. Swarm assault coordinated with Scaled Lord push. Humans counter with scavenged bioweapons and improvised incendiaries. Enemy coordination breaking. Smokescreen effective beyond expectations. Human close combat still superior to both opponents. Casualties rising on all sides, but human lines still intact. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, and the valley grew hotter. Bodies piled in the trenches. Blood soaked the dirt, turned it dark. The Scaled Lords called in more tanks. Fresh grav units dropped from low orbit and joined the fight. They fired heavy barrages that tore huge holes in the human defenses. For the first time, the human line bent. A section of trench collapsed under repeated plasma strikes. Soldiers fell back, dragging wounded with them. HFY thought this might be the moment they broke. Most species cracked here when the pressure became too great. The humans did not crack. Instead, they fell back to a second line of defense, prepared during the night. Fresh auto turrets opened up from new angles. Mines waited under the dirt where the enemy would step. The retreating soldiers turned and fired, covering their comrades. The swarm tried to follow, but walked straight into more thermite traps. Fire bloomed again and again. HFY leaned forward. His large eyes reflected the glow of the battle display. "They trade space for time," he whispered. "They accept losses only when it buys greater destruction." A human squad became cut off near the collapsed trench. 5 soldiers surrounded by Scaled Lords. They formed a tight circle, backs together. They fought with knives, pistols, and bare hands. One soldier lost an arm, but kept firing with the other until a blade took him down. The others fought on until the last round fired. Then they triggered grenades strapped to their chests. The blast killed the surrounding Scaled Lords and left a smoking crater. HFY felt something stir inside him. Not sadness exactly, but a quiet respect. He had watched death for centuries, but never like this. These humans did not die in fear. They died in purpose. Every action served the line. Every sacrifice bought time for the others. The battle stretched into afternoon. The Scaled Lords pulled back to regroup. Their tanks smoked, and many lay silent. The swarm waves slowed as their numbers thinned. The humans held the valley still. Their perimeter had shrunk, but not broken. Pause, pulling wounded into shelters and patching armor with quick welds. HFY opened a new section in his file. Day 1 complete. Humans face combined assault from 2 superior forces. Result, status quo ante bellum, with slight territorial loss on human side. Enemy losses estimated at 15% of committed forces. Human losses perhaps 800 total. Morale appears unbroken. Wounded continue to fight when able. He paused and looked at the small glowing camp below. They cooked food, shared water, and cleaned weapons. Some sang quiet songs in low voices. Others stood watch, staring into the smoke. HFY realized he no longer saw them as just another species. They had become something else, something that refused easy labels. He closed the recorder and sat in silence. The stars would come again soon. Night would bring new attacks. The humans would meet them the same way. And somewhere in the cold quiet of his watchpost, HFY began to understand that the beginning. Galaxy might never look at strength the same way again. I watched humans march into battle, and understood why the galaxy quakes. Night fell heavy across Kara 6. The twin moons hung low and pale, casting silver light over the smoking valley. The battlefield looked like broken teeth made of rock and metal. Twisted hulls of grav tanks lay everywhere. Swarm carapaces cracked open and scattered like empty shells. Human trenches glowed faintly from small fires, where soldiers warmed hands and checked weapons. HFY kept every sensor locked on the human camp. They moved little during the dark hours, but never stopped working. Repair teams welded broken armor. Medics stitched wounds with quick needles. Sentries stood in pairs, eyes scanning the shadows. One human soldier sat alone, cleaning a rifle over and over. His face showed deep lines and fresh scars, but his hands stayed steady. HFY opened the night log and spoke quietly. Cycle 412. Night Phase. Scaled Lord forces regrouping at Eastern Ridge. Swarm activity low. But what? Tunnel sensors detect movement. Humans maintain full alert. No rest rotation observed beyond brief shifts. All positions reinforced further. Then the sky lit up again. Dominion orbital batteries opened fire from high above. Thick plasma lances stabbed down into the human lines. The ground shook hard enough that even the watchpost felt the tremor far above. 3 mining complexes held by humans vanished in bright fireballs. Rock turned to glass, and dust rose in huge clouds. Calvier expected silence from the humans. Most species would scream rage or despair over open channels. Some would beg for mercy. Others would simply break and run. The humans answered with one short message, broadcast on every frequency. "This is Colonel Reyes. We are not leaving. You can leave, or you can die here. Your choice." No anger in the voice, no pleading, just calm words spoken like simple truth. The transmission ended, and the humans went back to work. They checked weapons, moved ammo crates, and dug out. Waited. Calvier felt the strange stirring again inside his chest. He had heard many speeches in his long life. Warriors who shouted promises of glory. Commanders who offered terms. Poets who spoke of honor and sacrifice. This message carried none of those things. It stated a fact, and left the rest to the enemy. The scaled lords answered with fury. Fresh shock troops dropped from orbit. Elite warriors in heavy-powered armor landed behind their lines. They marched forward under moving shields, carrying vibroblades and plasma glaives. Their roars echoed across the valley, like thunder. They aimed straight for the deepest human trench, where the command post hid. At the same time, swarm tunnels burst open in 5 places. Spores drifted on the night wind, thick and glowing. The spores carried acid that ate through metal and flesh alike. The air turned green and sharp. The swarm creatures followed behind, rushing in endless waves. The humans met both threats together. Captured swarm biomass in wide pits. The fires roared high, sending black smoke across the battlefield. The smoke mixed with the spores and turned them harmless. Many flying swarm fell from the sky, choking and twitching. The ground forces slowed, blinded by the thick clouds. When the scaled Lord elites reached the outer line, the humans opened hidden positions. Fresh squads rose from covered bunkers, carrying heavy chain guns taken from wrecked tanks. The guns spun up and poured fire into the advancing ranks. Shields cracked under the weight of bullets. Armor plates shattered, and elites fell screaming. The humans did not stay still. They moved in small teams, darting from cover to cover. Some carried captured Dominion power cells wired into crude devices. They threw these devices like grenades. When the cells hit, they burst in bright EMP flashes. The elite armor locked up and stopped moving, leaving the warriors helpless. Calvier watched one group of 5 humans close on a fallen elite. They ripped open the chest plate with powered gauntlets and drove blades into weak joints. The elite fought hard, but the humans worked together like parts of one body. One held the arms, another struck the neck, a third pulled the power core free and crushed it. The elite went still. He recorded every action. Night Engagement Phase 1. Humans employ scavenged biomass fires to neutralize spore clouds. EMP improvised from Dominion cells, effective against elite armor. Close combat observed. Humans show no hesitation in killing at range or hand-to-hand. Enemy losses mounting rapidly. The swarm tried a new tactic. They tunneled under the human center and erupted directly in the trenches. Creatures poured up from below, clawing at legs and arms. The humans fell back again, but this time they seeded the path with thermite charges. As the swarm followed, the charges ignited. The tunnel mouths became furnaces. Creatures burned alive, inside their own holes, pillars. The humans used the confusion. They advanced through the smoke, throwing grenades and firing short bursts. They pushed the swarm back, step by step, reclaiming lost ground. Some soldiers fought with swarm blades they had taken earlier. The blades cut through carapaces with wet sounds. Kael'var noticed something new. Many wounded humans refused to leave the line. One soldier lost a leg below the knee. A medic dragged him back, but the soldier pushed away. He propped himself against a rock wall and kept firing his rifle until his ammo ran dry. Then he drew a pistol and continued. The medic finally pulled him to cover, only after the soldier nodded once. Another human took a plasma burn across the chest. His armor smoked, and flesh showed black. The soldier kept moving. He threw his last grenade, then charged a scaled lord with a broken blade. He drove the blade into the throat, and both fell together. The human did not rise. Kael'var spoke slowly into the recorder. Wounded demonstrate extreme persistence. Refusal of evacuation common when position threatened. They fight until physically unable. Medical teams respect this choice and provide cover fire instead of forced removal. Casualty acceptance appears cultural. By the middle of the night, the scaled lord elites pulled back. Their numbers had dropped by half. Many left their dead behind. The swarm waves broke against the smoke and fire. They retreated into tunnels, leaving bodies piled high. The human perimeter had grown. They now held more ground than at sunset. Fresh trenches stretched outward. Mines waited in new patterns. Sentries stood taller, watching the dark ridges. Kael'var opened old Concord archives. He searched for mentions of humans from earlier contacts. Centuries ago, a few reports spoke of a species that vanished after terrible wars. The records used careful language. Words like relentless and adaptive appeared often. One file carried a redacted name and a warning. Existential concern. Proceed with caution. He closed the archive and looked down again. The humans shared food around small fires. Some laughed quietly. Others cleaned weapons in silence. A few stood alone, staring at the stars. Kael'var understood something important. They did not fight from hate. They did not fight for land or riches. They fought because the idea of not fighting never entered their minds. When the galaxy said run, they answered stay. When the galaxy said die, they answered make us. He felt the unease grow stronger. Not fear yet, but the beginning of it. The galaxy had grown used to certain rules. Species fought until one side broke or ran. The strong won. The weak fled or died quietly. The humans followed none of those rules. They bent the rules. They broke them. They made new ones with blood and fire. Dawn approached slowly. The sky turned gray. The valley smelled of smoke and metal. The scaled lords gathered fresh forces. The swarm prepared deeper strikes. The humans waited. Checked weapons. They patched armor. They looked toward the coming light without flinching. Kael'var kept watching. He could not look away. Not now. Not when something ancient and dangerous had woken on this small world. And in the quiet of his post, he began to wonder what the galaxy would do when it finally understood what humans truly were. I watched humans march into battle and understood why the galaxy quakes. The fourth day began with silence that felt heavier than any roar. The valley lay still, under a sky thick with ash and dust. Bodies from the night before remained where they fell. Scaled lord scales cracked open. Swarm carapaces split wide. Human soldiers rested in shallow holes, eyes open, watching every shadow. Kael'var counted their numbers. They had lost many, but still held the center of the valley. Their lines stretched farther than before. High above, the Dominion fleet moved into position. Massive ships darkened the sky. Their weapons glowed, ready to end the ground war in moments. Kael'var knew the pattern well. The Scaled Lords never lost patience for long. When ground forces failed, orbit always answered with fire. The bombardments started without warning. Plasma rained down in wide sheets. 3 human mining complexes turned to glowing craters. Rock melted and ran like water. The air shimmered with heat. A force rolled outward, flattening anything left standing. Kael'var watched the human positions vanish under the storm. He thought, this time they must break. No species survived such power from above. The humans did not break. Instead, small signals flashed from hidden spots across the valley. Pre-planted charges deep in the crust answered the bombardment. Seismic devices stolen from Dominion mines years earlier woke up. The ground trembled, then split open. Magma channels erupted directly under the Scaled Lord landing zones. Orange fire shot skyward, swallowing dropships and fresh troops. Whole platoons vanished in molten rock. Steam rose in huge clouds, carrying the smell of burned metal and flesh, even to the high orbit sensors. Kael'var stared at the display. His long fingers froze on the controls. He had seen orbital strikes before. He had seen ground forces die under them. But he had never seen the ground itself turn against the attackers. The humans had waited. Years. They had turned the planet into a weapon. The Dominion fleet hesitated. Ships pulled back from low orbit. Their commanders spoke on encrypted channels. Kael'var listened through cracked codes. Orders came fast. Retreat to safe distance. Reassess ground commitment. No further landings authorized. Then the humans struck upward. Old aerospace fighters rose from concealed caves in the mountains. These craft looked ancient, patched with swarm plating and Dominion hull pieces. They numbered only 20 against a fleet of hundreds, yet they launched without pause. Pilots flew straight at the troop transports still hanging low. The fighters carried no missiles left, only their own hulls filled with fuel and rage. One by one, they rammed hangar bays. Explosions bloomed bright against the black of space. Transports cracked open, spilling troops into vacuum. Some fighters aimed for engine nacelles. Others drove into weapon batteries. Fire spread across the fleet hulls. Dominion shields flickered, then failed under repeated impacts. The sky filled with silent flames and tumbling wreckage. Kael'var whispered into his recorder. 4th day orbital phase. Humans activate mantle charges. Magma floods Dominion beachheads. Losses catastrophic on attacker side. Aerospace suicide runs target transports. Fleet begins withdrawal. Unprecedented for Scaled Lords. Human pilots show total commitment to mission. No ejection observed. No survival expected. The ground battle shifted with the sky change. Scaled Lord forces on the surface saw their reinforcements burn above. Panic spread through their ranks. Some units broke formation. Others tried to dig in deeper. The swarm sensed weakness and pushed harder, tunneling under human lines again. The humans met every threat. They advanced now, not just holding, but taking. They moved in tight squads, clearing trenches one by one. They used captured vibroblades to cut through Scaled Lord armor. They threw swarm toxin grenades into tunnels, mouths, sealing them with collapsed rock. Medics worked faster, pulling wounded forward instead of back. Some injured soldiers walked on their own, refusing stretchers so others could carry ammo instead. Kael'var noticed Colonel Reyes for the first time. The human commanders stood in the open near the central command trench. One eye covered with a dark patch, uniform torn and bloodied, yet he moved without fear. He pointed, directing squads. He spoke into a headset, calm and clear. His voice carried the same steady tone as the night broadcast. Reyes ordered a push toward the eastern ridge, where Scaled Lord command tents still stood. Humans advanced under covering fire. They threw smoke grenades, then rushed through the haze. Rifles barked. Grenades rolled. Blades flashed. Scaled Lords fought hard, but their morale cracked. Many turned and ran, for the first time in recorded history. The swarm tried one last wave. Thousands poured from a massive tunnel. They aimed for Reyes himself, formed a wall around their commander. Machine guns chattered without pause. Flamethrowers reached out, turning the front ranks to ash. Reyes stood in the center, firing a heavy pistol with one hand. He killed 3 creatures that broke through before his squad pushed them back. Calvir felt the understanding settle deep inside him. Humans did not fight because they were without fear. They chose to push fear aside, again and again. They did not hate their enemies. They simply refused to let anyone decide their fate. The galaxy had grown soft with rules about when to stop, when to surrender. Humans ignored those rules. They kept going until the enemy had no choice but to leave. The day ended with the Dominion fleet pulling to high orbit. No more landings came. No more plasma fell. The ground forces that remained either died where they stood or fled into the tunnels. The swarm scattered their waves, broken and leaderless. The human perimeter now covered twice the ground it held at dawn. Flags rose blue and white against the smoke. Soldiers cheered quietly, some hugging, others simply sitting down to rest. Many looked up at the sky where the fleet had run. Calvir closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. He spoke the final words of the day log. Day 4 complete. Dominion orbital withdrawal confirmed. Ground forces routed. Swarm cohesion lost. Human territorial gain significant. Morale at peak. They do not conquer because they are strong. They are strong because they decide the galaxy does not get to tell them no. He looked down at the small figures below. They cleaned weapons. They tended wounded. They prepared for night. They acted as if the war had always been theirs to win. Calvir knew then that something had changed forever. The observant Concord had watched for millennia. They had seen every kind of strength, every kind of weakness. This was different. This was a strength born from choice, repeated until it became unbreakable. Priority transmission to the deepest council of the Concord. The message would travel encrypted and sealed. He wrote the opening lines in his mind. Humans, priority observation, existential hazard rating unquantifiable. Recommend immediate review of all prior containment protocols. The stars came out one by one above Caris V. The valley grew quiet, except for the soft sounds of humans working through the dark. They had marched into battle, they had stayed, they had won. And somewhere in the cold silence of his watchpost, Calvir understood why the galaxy would quake when it finally faced them without illusions. I watched humans march into battle, and understood why the galaxy quakes. A full week had passed since the first dropships touched down on Caris 6. The valley no longer looked like a battlefield. It looked like a place where something had ended and something new had begun. Smoke still rose in thin wisps from old craters, but the fires had gone out. The ground carried the marks of war, deep scars and dark stains, yet green shoots already pushed through in quiet corners. The air smelled cleaner somehow, as if the planet itself breathed easier. The Scaled Lords had signed the armistice papers on the 4th day after their fleet ran. They never offered terms to anyone before. They always demanded surrender or death. This time they asked for nothing. They simply agreed to leave the planet and never return. The swarm remnant had scattered. Their tunnels stood empty. Their creatures hid deep underground, too broken to fight again. A simple blue and white flag flew over the main human camp. It moved gently in the wind. Soldiers walked without hurry. Some carried tools to rebuild. Some sat and talked in low voices. Others stood watch, still alert, even in victory. The camp had grown. It now spread across the valley, with new shelters, trenches turned into roads, and mining rigs humming again. Calvir decided to go down. He requested truce colors from the human command. A small shuttle carried him alone through the clouds. He landed on a flat pad near the center of the camp. No weapons showed on his thin frame, only his recorder and a datapad. He stepped out into bright daylight. Humans turned to look, but no one raised a rifle. They watched with calm eyes. Colonel Reyes waited near the flagpole. He leaned on a crutch, because one leg still healed from plasma burns. His uniform hung torn and patched. One eye stayed covered with black cloth. The other eye looked straight and clear. Scars crossed his face like old maps. He nodded once when Calvir approached, respectful distance away. He spoke in clear standard tongue. I am Calvir, of the Observant Concord. I have watched from above since you arrived. I wish to understand why. Reyes studied the tall blue figure for a long moment. He gestured to a low bench made from salvaged metal. They sat together. The colonel moved slowly, but without pain showing. He rested the crutch across his knees. Why, what exactly, he asked. Why fight when every calculation said you would lose? Calvir said. Why stay when death came so close? Why push when the galaxy itself told you to stop? Reyes looked out across the valley, at his soldiers working at the new graves marked with simple stones, at the quiet groups sharing food. He took a slow breath. Because someone has to be the monster, so the rest of you can sleep at night, he said. Calvir waited for more, but the human offered no long speech, no explanation of destiny or justice. Reyes simply stated the fact, as he had stated every order during the fight. The fight, the alien felt the words settle inside him like cold stone. He had watched species for centuries. He knew fear. He knew pride. He knew survival. But this felt different. This carried weight that no archive file could hold. Reyes spoke again. We did not come here to die. We came here to live, to take what we need and hold it. We did not hate the Scaled Lords or the Swarm. We simply refused to let them decide for us. When they pushed, we pushed back harder. When they burned our homes, we burned theirs. When they ran, we followed until they begged to leave. That is all. Calvir looked at the flag moving above them. It carried no symbols of gods or kings, only colors that meant home to these humans. You lost so many, he said. Yes, Reyes answered. We always do, but we remember them. We carry their names. We fight so their deaths mean something. We do not break because breaking would make their sacrifice empty. Silence fell between them. The wind moved through the camp, carrying soft voices and the sound of tools. Calvir thought of every battle he had seen, every species that bent, or fled, or died quietly. None had ever turned defeat into a promise. None had ever made victory feel like a debt paid in full. Reyes stood with effort. He offered a hand, not in threat, but in farewell. Calvir took it carefully. The human grip felt strong, despite the wounds. Thank you for watching, Reyes said. Maybe now you understand a little. Calvir nodded once. He returned to his shuttle. The craft rose smooth and quiet, leaving the valley behind. He watched through the viewport as the camp grew small below. Flags waved. Soldiers moved on with their work. The planet turned slowly, carrying its new scars and its new owners. Back in the watchpost, Calvir sat alone in the dim light. He opened the main archive. He erased every old file on humans, every note from early contacts, every warning marked low priority. He created a new category. Humans, priority observation. Existential hazard rating. Unquantifiable. He began the final entry. His voice stayed steady, but softer than before. I watched humans march into battle, and understood why the galaxy quakes before them. Not because they are invincible, but because they are willing to become whatever the moment requires, even if that thing is the nightmare every other species fears. They do not fight for hate. They fight for choice. They choose to stand when everything says fall. They choose to hold when everything says run. They choose to become the monster when the galaxy needs one. They do not conquer because they want power. They conquer because they refuse to be conquered. He paused, then added one more line. Recommend all Concord stations update protocols. Immediate review required. Humanity no longer fits in observation files. They now require their own archive. Calevire closed the recorder. He looked out at the stars turning above Caris Vix. The planet looked small from here, yet it carried a weight that reached far beyond its orbit. Word would spread soon. The scaled lords would whisper. The swarm would hide deeper. Other species would watch with new eyes. The galaxy would learn slowly that old rules no longer applied. In the quiet of his post, Calevire felt no fear, only clear understanding. He had watched for centuries. Now he knew the next chapters would belong to them. The humans had marched into battle. They had stayed. They had won. And the galaxy would never forget why it quaked when they did.